So welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for March 26, 2021. We'll follow our standard practice of looking through the things we've tagged with milestone 11. Before we do that, does anybody have any announcements they'd like to share? If not, we'll move on to the issues that are tagged. Let me share my screen. Share screen and find the right one. There we go. Okay. So the first issue is discuss 902, which I added. So let me open it up to remind myself what that was. Oh, I guess we just want to go on and talk about that one. All right, so this one I think was on from the previous discussion. We did have some talk. I know Kevin, you chimed in as well because I know we talked a little bit about it last time. I think it was back still to, I'm not sure if everybody was here when we were talking about it last time, but this issue is around during shutdown, does, throwing a fatal error make sense or not? And we have talked about, like, we should probably have a way to opt into, providing a better error code so that the app can tell, like, am I shutting down or am I exception? So I think that's sort of a separate track that, yeah, we should do that. That probably will take a little bit longer in terms of, we need to fix, we need the new call. It'd have to get added into a Node API version, and would need to be backported. So it's kind of that's the longer term way to go, but it'll take some time. I think separately on this issue though, if we make the decision that doing something differently makes sense, we can do that because, I at least I think I've come up with this workaround that says, if you check beforehand if there's an exception pending, then if you get an error that tells you that an exception is pending, that means that it was the shutdown. Like it means you couldn't call into JavaScript. So you can actually tell in this very specific case of throwing the JavaScript error whether it was, a new exception or whether it was because you couldn't call into JS. So the question for us is like, okay, in this case, do we want to put this workaround in the meantime, in terms of, during shutdown, does it make sense to avoid throwing the fatal error or not?
Then does this workaround, are there any situations when this workaround explains a situation where it's not a shutdown? Do you know what I'm trying to ask? Like, we're fixing that problem with this workaround, but could we be maybe affecting other things with this workaround? Or are we 100% sure that this workaround is would only happen if JavaScript is shutting down and you're trying to call into it?
I'm like 99% because I'm never 100%. But like looking at the code, this NAPI's exception pending basically just says, I'm going to tell you whether there's an exception pending or not, right, on the thread. And then we immediately call this NAPI throw. And the very first thing it will be doing is checking whether there's an exception pending or you can't call into JavaScript.
Wait a second. You have to get and clear exception first, right?
Why?
Well, if you have an API's exception pending and you don't clear it, then it remains pending and it will continue to be pending. And so when you throw, it's going to return an API exception pending because it's still pending. You haven't cleared it yet.
But that's what we're trying to actually avoid here, right? So you see we say, is it pending? If it's false, then we call NAPI throw. Otherwise, we just say, oh, the status was exception pending. I don't need to call throw to find out that it's going to tell me the exception was pending.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And so what this kind of says is, well, I'm only going to try the throw if there isn't an exception pending when I'm starting. And therefore, the
Right.
only reason it's going to come back and tell me that there's an exception pending is if I can't
Mhm.
call into JS.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure that, you know, it's if there is an exception pending, you should get the exact same answer, because this throw before it does anything should basically say, is there an exception pending? And so this status should be the exact same as you would have gotten. We just haven't had to make the call. And if it wasn't pending, then the only reason that you should get this exception pending is if it actually, you couldn't call into JS.
Mm-hmm.
Oof.
So I think it, you know, go ahead.
We actually have a problem in NAPI throw. We use NAPI preamble, but we return NAPI clear last error. That is not good, because whenever you use NAPI preamble, you should also use like the other macro that actually checks that there's an exception pending. Oh my goodness, how did we miss this one? And the
Well, I guess the
NAPI
thing,
throw
well,
error as well.
but the thing is, you're throwing an exception, so there will be an exception when you return,
That's a good point.
right? So
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
specifically why we don't do that.
Yes, yeah. You're right. Yeah, that makes
So it's
sense.
like you wanted to throw, yeah, okay, there's now an exception, but you should know
It's
you
your
got one.
exception. Yeah, okay,
exactly.
okay. Right, because otherwise you would have to return get return status.
Right.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I did come across a case. So then I don't know, the stars align, right? So I was investigating, I was working through one of our samples that we have in the IBM Learning Path, and I noticed that it was actually, you know, having a, and I think I have that in here somewhere, right? I came across this failure where basically the throw as JavaScript exception was complaining in the shutdown. So you can see that this is like we were running the cleanup. It was running the cleanup handles. And, you know, I saw this, and it actually lent in the end, I could rework the code so that it actually did the shutdown before, like it was trying to do the shutdown of SQLite 3 in an exit, in the exit hook. And so what I'm not 100% sure is like, should we, you know, we talked earlier, like maybe we should let you run JavaScript further into the process, right? So maybe we should be, you know, if we fix that, it would have changed this. But it was a case where I was able to change the code, and it now does what it should do versus what it shouldn't be doing, which was like, you know, if we put in this workaround, we wouldn't have seen that failure. I wouldn't have known that it wasn't actually cleaning up properly, which is kind of what our earlier discussion was, is we throw this in the first place so that you actually find out that things are happening, right? So I did, you know, I've asked an issue in SQLite. I don't know. I don't think there's been any answer like, well, is it intentional that you can do this, or is this like user error already, right?
Because if you introduced that fix, what would have happened? Like the processes would have shut down cleanly, but you wouldn't have seen the error actually produce.
Exactly. Right? So the shutdown of SQLite would have failed. Now the process is shutting down, so would that have mattered? I don't know, right? Is kind of the, but yes, something that somebody had intended to have happen wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't have known about it.
Yeah, I think that is not good. I think we should, yeah, I think it would have been better than to not have the fix, so you would see this error. Because what if you did have something that was really critical in your cleanup path,
right?
And now it's not happening because we've it's not happening. It would have never happened anyways because of the bug. But now if you introduce this workaround, you would have never seen it not happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one where it's like, okay, in this case, I could actually work around it. It was good. There'll be probably the original one was open because there are other cases though where the originator really just can't do anything about it.
There's another thing here, like your workaround whereby we detect the error, we detect the inability to execute JavaScript may still be a good thing to have, but the result of that should not be returned. It should be to throw the existing exception as a fatal exception, right? Instead of throwing. So basically, what I'm saying is surface the original error rather than the error caused by trying to throw the error, because that's obscuring the real reason, right? So
that's a totally, that might be another different bug to fix.
So yeah, basically in this snippet, instead of the return, you want to fatal exception the original that you were trying to throw.
Right.
That's the only change here, and that I think is right, because the only alternative you have when you cannot execute JavaScript to inform the user is through a fatal error. Right. Regular throwing is out of the question, right? So, but you do need to surface it. Otherwise, we end up in this situation where you don't even know an error happened.
Right.
So, like, I don't know. I don't think it's a good idea to swallow errors, right? We should leave that up to the application.
Yeah, it's just it's just that there's no way they can. I kind of get the, like, it comes back to the terminating threads is just hard to handle nicely, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if it makes any sense to add a option, like let the application opt into that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. Failure to throw is considered fatal, yes or no?
Right. And that way, like if you're in a situation where your app is really doing that, then you could opt into that, and it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I know of a precedent. glib has this. You can set an environment variable where critical warnings are considered fatal.
Okay.
So yeah, that's
maybe
even
that's
a
why
runtime
by default it's a, like, we could make that a compile time option, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not suggesting we do the same thing, but I'm saying that there's a precedent for this. And then glib, the C library has this thing where you can set you can set an environment variable. It even has like 2 different levels where malloc failures are fatal or something like that. I forget what it is, but it introduces some rudimentary sort of memory consistency checking. So yeah, there's ample precedent for doing things like that.
Right. And so, like, we could, like, maybe it's just for this one case, right? Because I think this is the one place where we throw, like, your there, because it sounded like the rest of the places it's unlikely to cause grief, right? So do we want to just make it like any fatal exception? No, you're not going to get fatal exceptions, or just like in this case, if you can't throw an exception, then you get to choose whether it's fatal or not.
Yeah. This particular case would benefit, I think, from a user choice.
Okay.
So, and actually, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, I know doing like an environment check is a huge task, but come to think of it, it might be useful to make the runtime option, because then if this is happening in production, you don't need to rebuild. You need only turn this on, and you can get the error you want, and you can turn it back off. And you're using the production binary, so it's,
right.
It might be more valuable, though. I'm not sure how we'll do it. I'm not sure how we'll do it, because accessing the environment in a platform independent fashion is a huge thing. To the point of, or to the point that we might have to start depending on libuv for it.
Well, but we can go back to JavaScript for it.
How do you mean?
I mean, because in JavaScript we could just, like, the process env has the data we want.
Right, but we have no more access to JavaScript. That's why I don't understand.
Right, we'd have to get it earlier on, though, right?
Oh, I see. Okay.
You'd have to get it in advance somehow.
Oh, so like an init thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That there is also precedent for that, where you have to launch the process in a certain environment. If you set the environment variable later, it has no effect.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It would
I
be. It
don't
would be. Go ahead.
know. I don't know about us having this environmental variable check. To me, it makes more sense to have the the application have the environmental variable and then decide whether to turn that option on or not in the application. I don't think it makes sense for us to have it in
No,
our
but
code.
no,
I don't
we're not
know.
turning it on and off, right? We're just checking.
Well, yeah,
But,
that's what I mean. Like
the very act
it,
of checking it is.
But I
I
think.
think the checking should be
Oh, I
like
see.
up a level.
Right. Yeah.
So the
Okay.
application would check the environmental variable, and if it's set, then initialize an
Okay.
API as Node API as a way that it's fatal errors aren't exceptions or whatever.
Okay. Now there's a problem with that, because okay, so then we have a Boolean somewhere, which we have a Boolean that the user sets that says, die on failure to throw, right?
Could it
Yeah.
could it be passed in as this throw as
Into what?
JavaScript? The
Oh,
method
I
for
see.
throw as JavaScript, and you can have it as an optional Boolean that already has a value of like false or whatever we want to be the
Yeah,
default behavior, so that you wouldn't. So if you recompile, you don't have to change your code. You just take the default. So like
that's a
this function
Right.
here could
I
have
do
an
like that.
input.
Yeah. So
that's a
basically,
good
it would
idea.
be we'd extend this to have a something with a variable. Yeah. And so basically, you can choose, and that actually is nice because it lets you choose in specific places. So you can say
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
okay, if I'm terminating threads, um, the only thing the problem I think with that actually is that a lot of the traces that were being reported were like our own internal flows. Where like we try and make a function call, then when we can't, we
Mm,
throw as JavaScript exception. So I think that's part of the issue, is that
right.
it's like the user has made some higher level NAP or Node API call. It ends up with an exception, and we're trying to
Oh,
throw
yeah.
it, and it doesn't. So I
Yeah.
think it needs to be more of an environment setting. But thinking that I like Kevin's suggestion that we allow you to set it, but it's really up to the app to figure out how they want to expose that, like either through an environment variable or something
Yeah.
else.
The problem, okay, so the problem with having like a flag that influences the behavior of the library is we don't really have a place to store it,
It's got to
because
go in the env, right?
exactly, it has to be on the env. Um,
So,
but
we
we have
can,
not
there's
the
nothing,
env.
there are methods to add stuff to the env, isn't there?
Yes, there is, but what if the user has already used that, right? So we can set exactly one thing on the environment, which is a pointer. And if the
Ah,
user has already used it, then that's it. It's used up.
well, we can add something to the environment though, right?
Well, yeah, but we'd have to do that in core, and like
Um,
basically,
okay.
it's exactly, that solution that you had
Yeah.
for returning better, uh,
Yes.
uh,
Yep.
better status codes. Well, that's something we store on the environment, but it has to be done in core.
Right.
And actually, I'm starting to think that the two are kind of coincident, because once we have the API for opting into better status codes, then we will have the status code, right? And
Yep.
then we can write this workaround using the status code. We can just check for the new status code. We
Well,
don't need
yeah.
to
Yeah.
do this whole exception
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And then since this is new API, we might just surface that status code to the user and let them deal with it, and then they can give us the Boolean, and we can basically work this hook into Node.js API once we have it, and then that'll be an opportunity to handle this exception better, something like a user configurable. So we could have like
Yeah.
we could have a callback that says, you know, in case of failure, call this function, or in case of that particular status code, call this function. Either way, I think once we have the core API in place, we are probably going to want to accept. I'm sorry, wrong word. We're probably going to want to refine the occasions when we throw as JavaScript exception, right? So right now we throw as JavaScript exception under any non-OK return value, right? So we may want to say non-OK and non cannot call into JS only then, because that would be consistent with what we're doing now, right? And then in the cannot call into JS case, then don't throw as exception, but I don't know, call some user function, or just simply return the status.
Right. Well, that's what we were just saying. We don't necessarily want to just return. We want to give the app.
No. I don't mean return. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like basically, like in function call, right? If the result of an API call function is anything other than an API OK, we currently throw that as an exception, right?
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we refine that if it's not an API OK and it's not an API cannot call into JS, then you do whatever you do now. Otherwise, if it's an API OK, well, then you're fine. And if it's an API cannot call into JS, then you invoke a new code path, right?
Yep.
Which we will expose to the user, and the user will have a choice, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, we still may have a problem where, okay, what is that choice, right? Like, okay, so here we are holding this an API cannot call into JS status in our hands, but the function call routine is supposed to return an API value, right? The return value from the function. And so how do we tell the user that the status happened, right? If we expect the user to register like some kind of hook, then again we're in the same situation where do you store that hook, right? So then we're still basically at square zero in Node add-on API, but at least in core we have this functionality in place. So instead of storing a Boolean somewhere, now we need to store a function pointer somewhere in Node add-on API. So
right,
it's not either way.
I guess it's not something that we can store just for Node add-on API in our like extra data in our env wrapper.
No, because our env wrapper doesn't really have any storage, right? It just leanly wraps.
Yeah, okay.
So I mean, obviously we could introduce a more meaty wrapper around environment, which sets the instance data, and then the user doesn't see that. But then I'm not sure about API compatibility there, because if the user's code is sort of a mixture between core and wrapped code. So if the user makes an API calls by hand, then they expect a bare environment, and we don't get a chance to unwrap it for them if we do end up wrapping the environment. So that's gonna break ABI right there. It doesn't break core ABI, but it does break Node add-on API.
It does sound more dangerous too. Like it would be better to have, I think, be deferring to the actual env. Of course, so we can't really do that because, like, we can't put something specific to Node add-on API on that env because, it's got to be Node core.
Yeah, sounds like this is going to be a compile time option, because doing it at runtime is just
right.
Yeah, I don't see a way to do it at runtime, unless we start depending on like libuv, which is anathema for us.
No, I think especially like if we're going to do it in phases. Like I see the first phase is, do we want to do a workaround just by changing, use this workaround to say, well, in this case, we can figure out if it was this, and let the developer choose to do something different. I think just a compile time thing would be fine. And then once we introduce the better, the way to opt into better handler error codes, then we should look throughout the API how we can make it better. And it's probably,
yes, exactly. Yeah, the
if a
solutions
runtime
will
check or
present
whatever makes
themselves.
sense. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like the idea would be we could put on like an environment, like a define that would affect this behavior.
Yeah.
In the team meeting, and the consensus seem to be add a define that can control whether the fatal exception thrown in the maintainer to select package. The default will continue to be throwing the fatal exception. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, that's good. So that's a way forward. When I get some time, I can take a look at just tweaking this code to have a define that'll either do this return or not, right? So. Okay, anything more on that one before we move on?
Oh, that sounds about right.
Okay, so I think in this case, I'm going to close this out. Okay. Blog post about the transition. Sorry.
Please, can we make sure that we have a chance to talk about the environment teardown reference cleanup, because that's kind of an important issue, if possible, because I see Lucas has done some work, and
which one is that?
37802.
Okay,
it's
so
a
that's
pull
in
request
Node,
in
right?
core. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 37802. Okay, so take it away.
Yeah, so well, as you can see there, I did cherry pick your fix, but it sounds like it may not be it may still not be 100%, because I think Lucas already cherry picked it on his branch, and he's still getting a crash. So so yeah, that's, I don't know, Lucas, you wanna talk about this crash? Lucas is here, right? Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. I'm not sure right now that if the crash is related to the one we are fixing, but the crashing place is quite similar, right? It's still on the second pass callback, and I'm not sure. I will have a quick dig into the issue so that we can determine if we maybe land this before the next release.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, it would make sense.
So when you, so just so I understand clearly, okay? So you cherry picked this PR, right, as it was at that time, and then you cherry picked the commit made by Michael, and then you saw this crash, correct?
Yeah, but I'm not on the version that is on the latest 14
Oh, I see.
branch.
Okay.
So I will have to try, like say, landing it on the latest 14.x branch. So have a refresh run to
Okay.
ensure that our branch is up to date.
Okay. You could just check out this PR, right? And then that has this PR is on the latest 14.x.
Yeah, right.
And so you can just check out this PR. Okay, all right. So you're gonna check out this PR and then see if you're still getting this crash, correct?
Yeah, right.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and
All
then
right.
if you can find like if it does, I guess like a whatever test recreates it would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
problem seems quite similar. So I'm not sure. Maybe if I'm checking the correct branch and maybe the problem is getting fixed. Anyway, I'm going to do it sooner or later to be
Okay.
quick before we
Yeah.
can make the landing.
Yeah, it makes
Okay.
sense to do that before we land this one. Because
So then I guess it also makes sense to hold off on the V12 backport until we know that it fixes it, right?
Sounds great.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I got the branch ready, but there's no point in PRing until
Yeah.
we know that it's useful.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have a direction on this issue. So I'm done talking about it
Okay.
if everybody else is.
Okay, so let's move back to a blog post about transition to Node API. I think that's, I don't think we've made any progress yet. I don't know, we last time we spent a little bit of time just to put the outline. I guess it's just a matter of, somebody needs to have some time to take a look at writing it up.
Yep. Try to find some time.
Yeah, I don't think there's any more time, anything else to discuss on it this week.
No.
Okay. So this one, let's see where we're at. 3, 4. Okay, this one seems to be closed. So let's see. Maybe we need to close out this. I'm trying to think why we added it to the issue. Is there any more detail in here? Oh, okay. So this one, right. Yes, I remember why we put it on. Right. Okay. That one, I think we've basically got it resolved. We submitted a PR to ref. Was it Nappy Ref? And it seemed, we had to recreate the trees put together. So I think it's all done. We can take that off our agenda here. So I will close that out. Resolved. Okay. The rename, I don't know. I think Jim. Yeah. Yeah, Jim, you'd had done some work on that, right?
Yeah, I have a PR out on the examples repo to update the Node API resource. And I believe you reviewed it, Michael.
Yep. So it's just this one, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that's, from my perspective, that's been open for a while. And if there's no objections, I'll just go ahead and land that.
It would be fine with me, of course.
Yeah. Okay, last, I'm just going to go ahead and do it there.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so let's go back to anything else on that one that you want to bring up, or
Let's see. I'll just continue through the list.
sure. Okay.
We have to issue and pull requests on node.js API. If you have time, you can yeah,
Sure.
rename
Okay.
it, yeah. Yeah, 953 and 951.
Okay, so let's just.
One is for the documentation, and another is for the source code, comments in the source code.
Okay. Do you have, it sounds like you've taken a look. You're good with it?
He updated the paragraphs just before
Okay.
the meeting. So yeah, I needed to review the changes that I requested to him.
Okay. Okay, so that's good, but yeah, if that's another one along the same lines of if people can take a look, and we'll get those landed. So that was this one. Right, okay. So again, it's going to be descriptions, all things which won't let's take a look. Yeah, definitely shouldn't have any code effects. So although this
Yeah,
one,
There's some white
this
space there.
happened because for it is
Oh,
for
okay.
the linter.
the linter,
So
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So as
yeah.
long
This
as
may make
it's
sense to
making it
review this with
shorter.
-W. There's a lot of white space stuff here. Yeah, can you turn on -W? There's the little gear that actually makes it very
where
easy
is
to
it?
review. Where it says file filter jump to and then gear next to the oval that says open at the top of the page. Like
Here. Okay.
yeah, there, the gear, and then hide white space and apply and reload, and then it'll be a lot clearer.
Okay.
So then you don't see any. Well, I mean, this is reflow, so that's more than white space, but
right.
all those indentations will just be not seen.
Okay.
Or maybe they will be in this case because it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference.
Yeah, did I get it right?
Maybe. No, you did. You did.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess white space. If you change the makes it different.
Yeah.
But okay. So yeah, okay. So we got two good ones there to move that forward. That's good. Anything else we should talk about on that one?
No, about the renaming, but I added. So I opened a pair, paragraphs 948. I tried to add the CI configuration for Windows, so we can test the node.js API for Windows because reviewing some tests that Jack made, I found that they don't pass on Windows, and so with Jack, we think that it's a good idea to have this.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. If we can find out earlier than when we run the main CI, that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go and say That looks good to me. Anything else before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, stale issues. I think we don't have any stale issues to discuss, which is good. Tracking for modules, I don't think there's any new update there, although we can typically just go to npm node add-on API. Let's do a sniff check of things are, seems like things are tailing off a little bit. I don't know what that's, let's just look at, sometimes there's a funniness in terms of what's going on. Looks like Express is down a bit too, so I don't know why this week, but I would say we're kind of like still in the same ballpark. I haven't reviewed the external examples or looked at the debug testing for add-ons. The issues raised by module owners. So I guess any other ones in Node add-on API that people want to bring up? New issues or PRs that we should discuss? I see, Jack, you've opened a number of those test issues, right?
Yeah, just looking through them.
That's good. Do you have any questions or blockers or any of the things you need help from the team on at this point?
Not really, but like I just like added some tests for the globe object. So if you guys can like look it over one more time.
This one
That'd be
right
great.
here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Looks like Nick has taken a look and had some comments. So yeah, okay. If the rest of us can take a look, that would be great.
Yes.
Any other, so anything else that people have on their mind in terms of the Node add-on API ones? If not, I'll flip over to look at things that are tagged for Node in the issues. Find, there we go. So I think that's not new.
Maybe take out is issue, because like we want to see pulls as well, right?
Sure, that, yeah, okay. I was going to go and look at those separately, but this is even better.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Both.
Yeah, it just mixes them.
Yep, that's what we want. So this is the one we were talking about, defining 8.
Yep.
That's just backporting, right? So I don't see anything new there that we need to talk about either.
No.
Okay, so I will just go back to here and milestone. Oops, sorry, no, I still haven't gone back far enough, have I? Right. So I think that takes us to the end of the issues. Anything else we should talk about before we close out for today? I guess if not, thanks for everybody for coming to the meeting and everybody who's watching, and we'll see you in GitHub and next week.
Yep. Talk to y'all later.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.